What happens when a warehouse owner goes undercover to fix low morale and catches a supervisor tampering with expiration dates? Preston Adler stood at the back loading dock of Warehouse 11, sweat clinging to his back under the navy blue shirt with the fake name tag that read Rick. He shifted a 20-pound box of canned goods onto a wooden pallet, keeping his head down. It had been 10 years since he bought the warehouse chain. 17 locations across 5 states, each meant to run like a tight ship. But lately, customer complaints about spoiled goods and shipping delays were stacking up. His gut told him something was off, but every report from the district manager painted a perfect picture. He'd never met most of the warehouse staff face to face. The company had expanded fast. Layers of management had built up, and he'd let himself drift too far from the floor. This morning, he walked into Warehouse 11 as a new temp worker, part of a small contractor crew filling in for staffing shortages. The reason for the shortage made sense. 2 full-timers on medical leave, another on paternity leave, and one who quit after clashing with the current supervisor. Preston was told the supervisor, Kyle, had been holding it all together. That didn't match what he was starting to see. "Hey, Rick, you done with that stack yet?" a voice called. Preston turned to see a young woman in her 20s, dark curls bouncing as she walked up. Her name tag read Paige. She was fast, sharp, and clearly overworked. "Almost. Just making sure these are in the right order," Preston replied. Paige gave a tired laugh. "You're the first new guy who even asked. Most just drop stuff and leave it for me to fix later. Been doing this kind of work before, since college. 5 years. I started part-time, got promoted to inventory lead last year. But ever since Kyle took over as supervisor, it's been rough. He cut our breaks, doubled our quotas. And he won't let anyone question his system." Preston nodded, keeping quiet as he stacked another box. Kyle hadn't introduced himself yet. He'd barked some orders earlier, then disappeared into the back office. A few hours later, Preston was in one of the aisles sorting through a shipment of non-perishable goods. Paige worked the scanner beside him, checking expiration dates. "These say March," she said, frowning. "Should have been used last month." Preston picked up a can of soup. "Looks brand new." "That's the thing, they weren't. Kyle's been making us relabel stuff, says it's just a formality." Preston froze. "Wait, what?" Before she could answer, Kyle's voice boomed from the end of the aisle. "Paige. You done with that scanner yet, or you gonna talk all morning?" Preston turned to look. Kyle, a tall man in a tight black polo, walked toward them with a clipboard tucked under his arm. His eyes flicked to Preston. "You the new temp?" "Yeah, Rick." Kyle narrowed his eyes for a second. "Huh. You look familiar." Preston shrugged. "I get that a lot." Kyle grunted and walked past them, muttering something about lazy temps. Later that afternoon, Preston was assigned to help Kyle in the back storage room. The air was stale, the only light coming from a single overhead bulb. Kyle opened a box of boxed rice and pulled out a roll of white stickers. "You see this," Kyle said, slapping a new label over the original expiration date. "Corporate doesn't care as long as the shelves look full and the numbers match." Preston felt his chest tighten. "That's not legal," he said carefully. Kyle scoffed. "You think I care? I've been here 8 years. I know how to keep this place running. You want to keep your temp gig, don't ask questions." Preston didn't respond. He just watched Kyle toss another sticker roll onto the table and leave the room. He stood still, heart pounding. This wasn't just about bad management. This was dangerous, unethical, maybe even criminal. And it was happening under his nose. That night, Preston sat alone in his rental car, staring out at the warehouse lights. He thought about the customers. The kids eating expired food. The single mom who trusted their brand. He thought about Paige, working herself sick to fix a broken system that no one seemed willing to admit was broken. He was no longer just investigating morale problems. He was going to tear this thing apart from the inside. But first, he had to keep playing Rick a little longer. The loading bay smelled like hot cardboard and diesel exhaust, the kind of atmosphere that clung to your clothes long after you left. Preston adjusted his gloves and fell into rhythm, wheeling pallets toward the outbound dock. The morning shift had barely started, but already the air inside the warehouse felt dense with tension. He kept his head down, but his mind was running cold and fast. What Kyle had done, what he was still doing, was more than reckless. It was deliberate. And beneath the surface, there were signs that it wasn't just limited to him. Preston wasn't sure yet how far it went, but he was done assuming. As he moved past the sorting station, he saw a younger guy with a sleeve tattoo carefully taping a torn box shut. His name tag read Lewis. He looked up briefly, gave a nod, then went back to work. Preston stepped closer. "You always this careful?" Lewis glanced sideways. "You mess up one customer order around here, Kyle makes sure you remember it." Even if it wasn't your fault, Preston crouched down to help tape the side. "What happens when it is his fault?" Lewis gave a short breath through his nose. "Then it's your fault anyway." Ever pushed back, Lewis paused, then stood up straight. "I did once. Shipment came in wet boxes falling apart. Kyle told me to repack them and send them out. I said no. Said it wasn't safe. He wrote me up and cut my hours for 2 weeks. How long ago? 3 months. I've been quiet since." Preston nodded once and walked the pallet down the ramp. He didn't need more confirmation, he needed details. He needed to understand how this place had been allowed to rot under the surface while it looked clean from up top. Around mid-morning, Preston found Paige in the inventory cage, scanning barcodes with her eyes half-lidded from lack of sleep. Metal shelves towered above her, stacked with shrink-wrapped crates and bulk bins. She didn't notice him at first. "You ever get a full day off?" he asked, stepping inside. She looked over, eyes widening a little. "You kidding? I've been covering 2 people's jobs for weeks." "I asked for Saturday off last week. Kyle said if I wanted weekends, I should work at a mall." "You report that to HR?" she scoffed. "HR, they don't answer emails from warehouse staff. I've tried. They bounce me back to Kyle every time." There was a note of something deeper in her voice, frustration, yes, but something else, something closer to resignation. "Why stay?" Paige set the scanner down and leaned against the cage wall. "Because I keep thinking it'll get better. Because I actually care about doing this right. Because I've got student loans and rent, and because some of the people here, they're trying. They just don't have anyone backing them up." Preston nodded once. He watched her go back to scanning, her shoulders tight but steady. She wasn't someone who needed saving, she needed someone to hold the system accountable. By the time lunch rolled around, Preston noticed something else. Kyle was never seen doing actual work. He barked orders, vanished into the back office, and reappeared only to criticize or micromanage. He hadn't lifted a single box. In the break area, Preston sat across from a man in his 50s with a crooked posture and oil-streaked hands. His badge said, "Gene." He was eating a sandwich slowly, like each bite had to last. "You been here a while?" Preston asked. Gene wiped his mouth with a napkin. 7 years, longer than Kyle, used to be halfway decent work. What changed? New policies, new quotas. Kyle came in with a clipboard and started treating everyone like numbers, cuts corners whenever he can. "And if you speak up, you get scheduled for graveyard shifts every weekend." "You still on full-time?" Gene shook his head. "Dropped me to 32 hours last quarter, said I wasn't producing value per hour, I got arthritis in my hip. Can't lift like I used to, but I can still run circles around half these kids on logistics." Preston didn't respond. He didn't need to. Gene's voice already said everything that mattered. That afternoon, something new happened. Kyle called a team meeting. It was rare, the kind of thing that only happened when corporate was rumored to be watching. The staff gathered by the central aisle, forklifts parked, everyone quiet. Kyle strutted in with a clipboard and fake cheer in his voice. "All right, heads up. We've got a surprise audit coming next week. That means our numbers need to be perfect, our shelves spotless, and our inventory tight. No screw-ups. If I catch garbage on the floor or labels peeled off, it's on you." Paige tensed beside Preston. Kyle kept going. "And let me say this now, if anyone's behind on quotas this week, don't expect overtime. I'm not paying people to stand around." Preston stepped forward. You expecting us to relabel old stock again? The group went silent. Kyle's eyes locked onto him. What did you just say? Preston didn't blink. You said the numbers had to be perfect. Does that mean we're faking them again? Kyle walked up until they were only a foot apart. You're a temp. You don't ask questions, you do what you're told or you're done. Preston held his ground. That how you talk to HR when they ask about tampered inventory? Kyle's jaw clenched. You're walking a line, Rick. I'm pretty good at keeping balance. Paige stepped in. Don't talk to him like that. Kyle turned to her without hesitation. You want to go back to night shifts, Jean spoke from the back. You threaten everyone who asks questions or just the ones who still care. Kyle's face turned red. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the door from the office wing opened. District Manager Marcia Owens walked in, holding a tablet. She looked surprised at the gathered group. What's going on here? Kyle turned quickly. Just a quick team sync, motivational check-in, you know how it is. Preston stepped forward. He's been relabeling expired stock. He cuts hours for anyone who pushes back. He's threatened workers for asking questions. I've seen it. So have they. Kyle laughed too loudly. This guy's a temp. He's got no idea what he's talking about. Marcia looked around the room. No one backed Kyle up. Lewis lifted a hand. He's right. Then Jean. I've got documentation. Paige didn't say anything, she just looked at Marcia without blinking. Marcia looked at Preston. Who are you? I'll explain, but you need to pull the inventory reports from the last 6 months. And check the security footage from the storage room. Marcia hesitated, then nodded once. Kyle, office. Now Kyle tried to protest, but she cut him off. Now the warehouse stood still. Kyle walked off stiffly, trying to keep his shoulders high. Marcia turned to the group. Everyone take 10. I'll need statements later. As the team broke apart, Paige walked over to Preston. You're not just a temp, are you? Preston pulled off his name tag and handed it to her. No, but I am your boss. The conference room was quiet except for the low hum of the overhead light. Preston stood at the head of the table, arms folded, watching Kyle lean back in a chair across from Marcia. Her tablet sat untouched in front of her, the screen dark. Kyle's arms were crossed, eyes darting between them like he was calculating an angle that no longer existed. Marcia kept her voice even. I pulled the last 6 months of inventory logs. There are missing entries and more than 50 shipments that were relabeled without proper documentation. Kyle shrugged. The system's been glitchy. We've had barcode issues for months. I've reported it. You didn't. I checked the IT ticket history. Nothing from this location since February. Kyle shifted in his seat. You know how these workers are. They exaggerate. They don't understand the volume we're dealing with. Preston stepped forward. They understand more than you think. They've been working double hours to cover gaps you created. You've been padding metrics with fake data and endangering customers. And when people spoke up, you retaliated. Kyle's voice dropped an octave. You can't prove retaliation. Preston stared at him. I don't need to prove it. You're finished, effective immediately. Kyle's eyes went cold. You're making a mistake. No, said Preston. You made it the day you decided to fake compliance instead of fixing problems. Kyle stood abruptly, chair scraping across the floor. You're gonna regret this. Marcia didn't flinch. Security will escort you off the property. Leave your badge and tablet. He threw the badge onto the table, his jaw tight, then walked out without another word. Marcia exhaled. I'll handle the formal paperwork. What do you want to do next? Preston looked out the glass wall at the warehouse floor. I want to talk to them, all of them. It took 15 minutes to pull everyone into the main loading zone. The forklifts were powered down, the noise of the conveyor belt silenced. Workers stood in a loose semicircle, some with arms crossed, others leaning against crates or sipping from water bottles. No one looked entirely at ease. Preston walked to the center. No clipboard, no name tag, just the people and the truth. I've spent the last 3 days working beside you, he said. And I saw more than I expected. I saw people trying to do their jobs right, under pressure they shouldn't have to carry. I saw dedication, attention to detail, and pride in your work. I also saw a system that punished those things. He paused. My name is Preston Adler. I own this company. A few people exchanged looks, but no one spoke. Paige stood off to the side, her expression unreadable. I used to know every part of this business, but as we grew, I stopped showing up. I trusted reports, numbers, and people I shouldn't have. That's on me. Gene raised his hands slightly. What happens now? First, said Preston. Kyle's gone, permanently. No one here should be afraid of losing hours or being punished for doing the right thing. Lewis stepped forward. He still has access to the schedule system. He could change it from the back end. IT is locking him out by the hour. You'll have a new interim supervisor by tomorrow. A woman from the packaging line, someone Preston hadn't spoken to yet, called out. And after that, we rebuild, he said. But not on my terms, on yours. I want to know what's broken, what's slowing you down, and what's keeping you from doing your best work. Not just today, ongoing. The crowd stayed quiet, but the tension began to loosen, shoulders lowered. Someone in the back nodded once. Preston turned to Marcia. We'll bring in a third-party audit team next week, not just for inventory but for labor practices. No one from management can interfere. Then he looked at Paige. Can I speak with you? She hesitated, then followed him toward the staff lockers, still holding the barcode scanner she hadn't put down all day. They stopped near the service entrance. You didn't have to step in during that meeting, he said. But you did. I wasn't going to let him steamroll someone again. You've been holding this place together, I saw it. Everyone did. She looked down at her boots. It's not enough. People are burned out. The equipment's behind. Half the scanners don't sync properly. Then let's fix it. But I need someone to step up. Someone who understands the floor and isn't afraid to speak up. She looked up slowly. You offering me his job? No. I'm offering you a temporary lead role with authority to recommend structural changes. We'll rotate the position every month while we search for a permanent supervisor. You'll have direct access to me and Marcia. If something's off, you flag it. That's a lot to drop on someone who's been ignored for a year. You've earned it. But it's your call. She looked past him toward the loading dock where the others were still gathered. I'll do it on one condition. What's that? Everyone gets a say, not just me. Preston nodded. Done. Later that afternoon, Preston sat in the office Kyle once used, a space that felt colder than the rest of the building. He opened the top drawer and pulled out a stack of unsigned disciplinary forms. Most had names he now recognized. All of them had the same signature line at the bottom. Failure to meet expectations. He placed them in a cardboard box and shut the drawer. Out on the floor, the team had already begun reorganizing the inbound sorting area. Paige was directing 2 workers, clipboard in hand, while Lewis and Gene moved a scanner station closer to the processing line. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't be for a while, but the fear was gone. Marcia stepped into the office. You still want the warehouse audit next week? Yes. And after that, I want one at every location. Quietly, I need to know if this was isolated or if we've got deeper rot. You think this is the only place? No, I think it's the one that cracked first. She nodded, then paused. We're going to need more people. If we start rotating shifts to reduce burnout, we'll need at least 4 more hires. Start the recruiting. But screen for values, not just speed. I'd rather move slower than hire someone who'll cut corners again. What about the ones who left because of him? Reach out. Let them know the door's open. Marcia turned to leave, then paused. You're staying in town. For now, I'll finish the week here. I want to earn back the trust I lost. As she left, Preston looked out the office window again. The warehouse was moving. Not more chaotic, just different. Coordinated. Intentional. And for the first time in a long while, it looked like something worth rebuilding. The following Monday began with the scent of industrial-grade cleaner still lingering faintly by the staff lockers. The night sanitation crew had done their job thoroughly. Preston arrived just after dawn, wearing the same beat-up work boots he'd worn all week. He didn't head to the office. He went straight to the floor. The warehouse was quiet. Forklifts idled in their bays. Only a few workers were moving along the aisles, scanning pallets and rechecking labels. A clipboard rested on a folding table near the outbound dock, pages clipped neatly under a fresh log sheet. Paige was already there, tapping a stylus against her tablet, her hair tied back tight, a small bruise on her forearm likely from a pallet corner. Her eyes didn't leave the screen when she spoke. "We've got 3 shipments going out today. 2 are clean. 1 needs to be broken down and rechecked. It came from the regional supplier with mismatched codes." "Who caught it?" Preston asked. "Lewis. He flagged the lot during intake. Said the barcodes didn't match the manifest. He was right." Preston looked toward the intake area. Lewis was elbow-deep in crates, cross-referencing labels without being told to. The scanner beeped in steady rhythm. Paige looked up. "We're moving better, but there's still tension. A couple people are worried about fallout. They've seen managers vanish before but never come back to explain anything." "They deserve answers," Preston said. "Not secondhand updates. Hold a staff meeting before lunch. I'll be there, no formality, just straight talk." Paige hesitated. "You sure?" "Some of them still don't believe you were actually on the floor last week." "Then I'll show them again." By noon, the warehouse had shifted into midday pace. The break room wasn't large enough for everyone, so they cleared space near the main aisle. Folding chairs were pulled from storage, arranged in loose rows. Some workers stood, arms crossed or leaning against shelving, while others sat fidgeting with pens or gloves. Everyone was here. Preston stood without a mic. He didn't need one. "I said last week that we'd rebuild from the inside." That's not just about removing one bad supervisor. It means fixing what allowed him to operate unchecked. That starts with you. He scanned the room. No one interrupted. Some nodded. Most just watched. "We've brought in a third-party audit team. They'll be here Wednesday. Not to punish, but to listen. They'll talk to anyone who wants to speak anonymously. No managers in the room. No interference." One of the newer hires, a soft-spoken man named Derek who'd kept his head down most of the week, raised a hand. "What about the shipments that already went out with altered dates? Are we recalling anything?" "Yes," Preston said. "We've already pulled affected batches from shelves. We identified the lot numbers through the security footage and Kyle's terminal logs. The damage is containable and we're being transparent with all distributors." Paige stepped up beside him. "We're also changing how inventory is verified. From now on, no one works alone when documenting expiration dates. 2 people on every check. Random spot audits every 3rd day." A woman in her 40s with a compression sleeve on her wrist raised her voice. "So how do we know the next person in charge won't just do the same thing Kyle did?" "You'll know because we're not hiring from the outside for that role," Preston said. "We'll rotate team leads for the next 3 months. Each one will be evaluated by the people they work with, not by me, not by upper management." Someone clapped once, then another. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just honest. After the meeting, workers filtered back to their stations. A few lingered, asking questions. Preston answered each until the group thinned out. Then he walked toward the intake bay where Jean was reassembling a new scanner mount. Preston crouched beside him. "You doing all right?" Jean nodded. "Yeah. Just getting used to not being second-guessed every 10 minutes. I found your name on a stack of write-ups Kyle never submitted. He logged them but didn't file them. Said you were unreliable." Jean snorted. "He didn't like that I kept a paper log of everything he told me to do." "Keep doing that," Preston said. "Digital logs can be altered. Yours can't." Jean looked up. "You really think this place is going to hold together long-term? Not on its own. But with the right people in the right positions, yes. Then put Paige in charge, not temporarily, permanently." Preston nodded once. "We'll get there." That evening, after the last outbound shipment had cleared the dock, Preston sat across from Paige in the office that no longer had Kyle's nameplate. The window blinds were open now. The desk was cleared of clutter. A corkboard on the wall held a single sheet, a handwritten list of process improvements, each one initialed by a team member who suggested it. Paige leaned back in the chair. "We're still short 2 workers, and the equipment's overdue for maintenance. I filed the request, but the vendor says they're backed up." "I'll approve the budget for replacements if needed," Preston said, "but you'll handle the vendor negotiations. You've got the context." She gave a short nod. "I can do that. Also, Lewis wants to train as a forklift operator. He's been asking for months, but Kyle blocked the application. Schedule the training, I'll cover the cost, and bump his pay once he's certified." She paused. "You realize what you're doing here won't fix every warehouse overnight." "I do. But it starts with one." She stood and gathered her tablet. "You sticking around for the late shift?" "Not tonight. I've got a flight to Ohio. Warehouse 4's had a spike in returns. I'm not taking any reports at face value anymore." As she left the office, Preston looked over the corkboard again. At the bottom of the list was a new line written in smaller print. "Make the break room bigger, suggested by everyone." He smiled quietly and turned off the light. The next morning, Warehouse 11 began its shift without a single delay. Paige reviewed the dispatch schedule while Lewis trained with the new forklift instructor. Jean handed off a maintenance checklist to the incoming crew. The mood wasn't cheerful, it was focused, purposeful. Upstairs, the office door remained unlocked, no closed doors. No withheld answers and no more altered labels, just work, done right.